Welcome children to this session again. Today we are going to discuss about another new lesson of your physics lesson for class 8, that is friction. Regarding this term, we have seen already in our previous class of force and pressure. Therefore, it is a common term for us, friction. Today we are going to discuss in detail about this term, definition, what causes friction, types of friction, advantages and disadvantages, how to increase or to decrease friction. Please take down the points notebook as well as the textbook, children. Be ready. This word friction, to begin with, let me consider 4 situations in which this word is related. A ball moving on the ground stops after a while. You might have played or seen children playing. The moment you kick the football on the ground, it moves a certain distance and it comes to rest. Second situation, if pedaling of the cycle is stopped, it may move further to distance, but ultimately it comes to rest. Third case, vehicle slows down when brakes are applied or when it approaches the signal. When the red light comes, automatically vehicles stop. We slip when we step on banana peel. Okay, nowadays it's raining heavily. Everywhere we see the slushy road, muddy road. We have to walk very carefully. The fourth one, it is difficult to walk on the smooth and the wet floor. In all these situations or the examples, we relate one term, that is friction. Moving ball on the ground automatically comes to rest. A cycle, when the pedaling is stopped, it moves a certain distance, but it comes to rest. In all these cases, a force which plays at the behind, we call that as friction. It is an opposing force, we can say. Ball was moving, it was stopped by that force. Therefore, opposing force. Therefore, how do we define the term friction? The force which opposes the motion of one object over another which is in contact with it. Therefore, we say it is an example of contact force. We have seen in our previous class of force and pressure. It is an example of contact force. When two objects come into contact, this force comes into existence. So, in simple words, we can say it is an opposing force. The force which opposes the motion of objects over motion of one object over another, which is in contact with it. Then, what is the direction of the friction force? See, two children moving a box in one direction. We have seen in our force and pressure lesson, there will be 4 types of force will be acting on it. One will be force of push, another will be force of friction, another will be the force of gravity towards the earth, that another one becomes normal force, that is force of reaction exerted by the ground. Always the force of gravity and the normal force will be equal. They get cancelled out, then the motion decides on the force of push and force of friction. See, this is from left to right. If they move the box, the force of friction becomes right to left. Therefore, the friction force acts in a direction opposite to the direction of motion of objects. What is the cause of this friction? What makes to feel the friction force? What is behind that? See, we can quote number of surfaces which have different irregularities. It may be a floor with the tiles, or cemented, or tar which is placed, or cement road, or mud road. There are different types of mediums are there. All the surfaces are not even. There are irregularities on the surfaces. Friction is because of irregularities in the surface of the two objects. Irregularities. See, even the finest or smoothest surface, if you can consider, if it is focused or magnified, irregularities will be found. Therefore, irregularities in the surface of the two objects which are in contact with each other is the cause of friction. If we consider the two surfaces, one is smoother, another becomes rough. Smooth surface will offer less resistance. Force of friction becomes less for the smooth surface. For the rough surface, the force of friction becomes more. Factors affecting friction, children. The friction depends on which are the factors. First one, nature of two surfaces. Nature of two surfaces. If the two surfaces are smooth enough, the force of friction becomes less. If they are rough, then the force of friction becomes more. That's about nature of two surfaces. Then the force with which two surfaces are pressed, nothing but mass of the objects. If two objects having heavy mass placed one above the other, then the friction becomes more. That's about friction becomes less for the smoother surfaces and more in rough surfaces. Friction becomes more for large masses. Which are the types of friction? Therefore, in your textbook, children, there are three types of frictions that they mention. One is static, another one is sliding, third one becomes rolling friction. As the name itself says, first one, static, which is at rest. Second one, sliding, that is in movement. Third one, rolling. We'll see one by one. The first one, static friction. This friction exists when the object is at rest, children, not in motion. Therefore, very carefully you have to listen. Make a note of it. The maximum frictional force present between the two objects when they are at rest. See, here an wooden block is placed on the table and a spring balance is taken. Spring balance is attached to one end of the wooden block and the person is trying to pull it towards. When the force becomes 5 Newton, still it remains there only. Still he applies more force. When the force becomes 10 Newton, still remains. When it becomes 15, it starts to move. Therefore, the maximum frictional force exists between the two objects when they are at rest, not in motion. When they are in motion, the force of friction becomes less. When they are at rest, the force of friction becomes more. Therefore, in simple, the maximum frictional force present between the two objects when they are at rest. It's about static friction. Just before the displacement of a book on the table, the book which is kept on the table, which is tried to push with one push, before its displacement, the frictional force exerted by them, we call that as static friction. The next, sliding friction. The force of friction exists when they slide or move. The frictional force present when one object moves or slides over the surface of another object is called sliding friction. When an object moves on another object, that time the friction is known as sliding friction. Sliding friction will be lesser than that of static friction. The third one, rolling friction. When an object rolls over the surface of another, okay, pencils have been used. Okay, that's another moment. If it is a big log, we find very difficult to move. If pencil-like structures or pipes have been given to make this object big log to move, becomes easy. Therefore, the invention of wheel is one of the most important invention of humankind. Therefore, when an object rolls over the surface of another, the resistance to its motion is called rolling friction. Example, trolley bags or these kind of situations. Then we see lots of advantages of friction. Because of friction, that seems to be we are enjoying the life. The building, if you see in minutely, one brick stays on another because there exists friction. Had there been no friction, the another one brick will never stay on another brick. Because there is friction, it stays, therefore the construction. We will see one by one advantages of friction. See children, when you go through this lesson, never try to by heart anything from it. Try to understand, refer the textbook and write down the points and learn. Advantages. First one, friction enables us to walk without slipping. The shoes remain in the foot, slippers remain in the foot. We are able to walk without slipping is because of friction. Second, friction enables a car to move on a road without skidding. Friction enables to apply brakes, slow down or stop a moving car. Friction enables us to write and draw on paper. Friction enables us to pick up and hold things in our hands. We are easy to hold things in our hands. Because of the friction between the palms and the object remains, the object remains in our hand. Friction enables to light a matchstick. Friction enables us to cut wood with saw. Nails can be fixed on the wall. These are the advantages of friction. Disadvantages. We'll see one by one. Friction wears away the soles of the shoes and tires of vehicles. Common thing we will notice it. Okay? The soles of the shoes wear out as the days go, because we will be walking and running throughout the days over different surfaces of uneven irregularities. It may be tar road, it may be cement road, or just a cement floor, or mud road, etc. Therefore, wear away the soles. See, the soles have been torn out. Friction wears out the rubbing machine parts. The machine parts getting rubbing away. The third one, friction wears out the brake pads of the vehicles. Continuous use of the vehicle. After a few months, the brake pads have to be changed. Friction wears out steps of staircases. See the steps of the staircases. This will happen about 50, 60, 70 years later, after an old building in which much of the students have walked on it, people walked on it. Therefore, look into the shape of the staircases. Wear out. Friction produces heat which may damage machine. Even friction produced when two palms are rubbed together. that wear out. Sixth one, friction reduces the efficiency of the machine. The quality will slowly go down, slows down the motion. These are certain disadvantages of friction. Therefore, sorry, methods of increasing friction. There are situations where the friction is very much necessary. How to increase friction? Grooves are made in the soles of the shoes to prevent slipping. Look into the bottom part of the shoe or the slippers. Different designs have been made. Okay, different designs have been made. These are the different grooves we say. Grooves is a new word. Designs, carving out. Okay, taking out the bottom of the particle, bottom of the part with a different design, which avoids slipping. Okay. Then second one, treads are made in the tires of the vehicle which prevent skidding. You have seen, children. The treads are different for different tires. You have seen. See the marking and some moldings have been done. We call them as treads. Different markings have been done on the wheel which prevent skidding. Okay, remain firm on the ground, travel easily. The third one, spikes are provided in the shoes of the players and athletes which prevent them from skipping. IPL is going on. Look into the shoes of the players. Okay, in every shoes spikes are provided. Spikes have been provided which give them big grip so that they never slip. The fifth one, gymnasts apply some coarse, a powder-like substance on their hands to increase friction. To increase the friction for better grip. Better grip is provided. The next part we have in this lesson is about lubricants. Lubricants. It is not a new term, children. Substance that reduces friction are called lubricants. Example, oil, grease. Regularly you might have seen vehicles are serviced once in a month, once in 15 days. They go for a service. They wash the vehicle, then apply the grease and the oil wherever it is necessary. That's about lubricants. Methods of reducing friction. What are the ways the friction can be reduced? By making the surface smoother by polishing. So this is one way we can reduce the friction. But you have to be very careful when we walk on this. We may slip and fall down. By applying lubricants, oil or grease to the rubbing surfaces, friction can be reduced. By using wheels to move objects, very common term, heavy objects move. Almost all the objects that travel on the ground move on the wheels. Maybe a huge truck, maybe the train runs on wheels which carry heavy objects, wheels to move objects by using ball bearings between the moving parts of the machine. Fluids, regarding this term also we have seen in your previous class. Substances which are able to flow easily are called fluids. It may be water, it may be air. Together we call them as fluids. Do the fluids exercise friction? The answer is yes. Fluid friction. The frictional force exerted by the liquid or the fluid is called fluid friction. What is the direction it acts? The fluid friction acts opposite to the direction of motion of objects. Fluid I have taken water, on which the boat or the boat travels. See, if you replace this water with oil, then speed of the vehicle will decrease. It is the friction depends on the type of the liquid that we take, then mass of the object, shape of the object, etc. We are going to see one by one. Therefore, fluid friction means the frictional force exerted by the fluid is called fluid friction. It also very similar to the friction. It acts opposite to the direction of the motion of objects. Boat moves in water, rocket it travels into the space. Shape of the boat and shape of the rocket matters. One thing, the shape of the boat as well as the shape of the rocket, if you consider, they are streamlined, which prevents friction, which reduces friction. When they travel in water, the fluid friction becomes less. When they travel in air, this streamlined surface reduces air friction. The magnitude of frictional force exerted by a fluid on an object moving through it depends on, we'll see one by one, speed of objects, shape of the objects, size of the objects, nature of the fluid. We will see the examples one by one. Higher the speed, more will be the frictional force. Lesser the speed, lesser will be the frictional force exerted by the fluid on the object. Second one, streamlined shapes. You have seen, streamlined shapes face less frictional force. It may be in water or it may be in air. Larger the size, greater the fluid friction. In this case, you can take the example of huge ship and a small boat. The ship exercises larger frictional force, experiences larger frictional force in the water than a small boat. Therefore, mass, higher the size, larger the size, greater will be the fluid friction. Next, higher the viscosity is another new term, children. More the thickness, greater the fluid. We have discussed, instead of water, if oil is taken, oil is thicker than water. Therefore, oil will exert a greater fluid friction than water. That's the meaning of it. Higher the viscosity, more thickness, greater the fluid friction. Disadvantages of fluid friction. What are the disadvantages of this friction exerted by the fluid? This reduces the speed of objects. Automatically, when a ship moves in the water, there will be a friction of force which is exerted by water on the ship. Therefore, automatically, speed of the object gets reduced. This decreases their efficiency of the vehicles. Slowly, the quality decreases. Methods of reducing fluid friction. What are the methods that have been used to reduce fluid friction? You can compare the shape, similarity in shape for aeroplane and the bird. Streamlined shape can minimize the friction. Streamlined shapes, it may be a boat or ship or a rocket, can minimize fluid friction. Second one, similarity in shapes of an aeroplane and the bird will reduce friction. So these are all about this lesson, friction, children. It's an easy lesson. Note down the points carefully, go through the textbook once again and do some of the activities which are mentioned in it, children, which may give a broader experience to learn the concepts better, children. Learn these concepts well, children. All the best, children. Thank you.